Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I'll just ask everyone to find a seat and we can get started soon. Good evening. It is wonderful to see all of you here, and so many here, and also to have others join us by live stream. Welcome to the book launch of Walking Together by Edith and Neill von Gunten. I invite us to begin by acknowledging that we are here in Winnipeg, live and work as treaty people in the territories of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Dakota, Dene, Métis, and Ojibwe nations. We gather in Treaty 1 territory. We benefit daily from Treaty 3 water and Treaty 5 hydroelectricity. Others on live stream may be joining us from other sacred lands. We make this acknowledgement in respect and appreciation for the host peoples, the ancestors, and their present-day relatives who have and continue to love and care for this land. We also gather in a spirit of gratitude and hope, grateful for a growing circle of relationships between Indigenous and settler communities, and hopeful because greater commitments and deeper understandings are being made to foster reconciliation. And it seems particularly fitting to have this gathering tonight in preparation for tomorrow's National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. I'm appreciative of the orange glow in the crowd. Walking Together is a testament into a journey of Indigenous settler intercultural relationships, premised by love and acceptance. The book contains stories and reflections written by Neill and Edith, longtime ministry workers for Mennonite Church Canada, on their many decades of living amongst Indigenous communities along Lake Winnipeg. We are grateful that Stan McKay and Norman Meade, good friends of Edith and Neill, respected Cree and Méade church leaders and elders, are here to be part of tonight's panel conversation. So welcome. We regret that Clarence and Barbara Nepinak, traditional Ojibwe educators and knowledge keepers who were planning to be here, are unable to be present this evening. My name is Arlen, and I am the director of Common Word, a national Anabaptist bookstore and library jointly operated by Canadian Mennonite University and Mennonite Church Canada, where it's possible to buy or to borrow or to access Anabaptist and related resources online. I will also note that Common Word has over 400 physical and digital Indigenous settler relations resources that you can access, including, of course, Walking Together. And it's Common Word's privilege to be hosting tonight's conversation. For those who are participating online, I invite you to send a brief chat message with your name and general location so we have a sense of who is joining us. This conversation is being recorded and will be kept online at Common Word for future viewers. After the presentations, there will be time for questions and answers. Online viewers can submit their comment or question through the chat function. And after the formal part of the event, the book will be available to purchase in store at Common Word or online at commonword.ca. And I will include a link to the book in the chat. We're in for a good conversation. Welcome. Doug Clausen, Executive Minister of Mennonite Church Canada, will say a few words, followed by Neill and Edith, and followed then by our panel conversation. Welcome to all.
Good evening. It was a day much like this that Edith and Neill came over to the offices over at Mennonite Church Canada, and we sat outside and visited on the patio. And though we had met in years past, it was my son and your grandson that actually helped us to reestablish a relationship. And I think I even saw Caleb here. He's here somewhere. Yeah, they connected as roommates, and we found a common bond then. And our son also had been invited up to your cottage and into your home. But there's a lot more than that. It was during my time pastoring in Calgary that Daryl and Gladys Heidebrecht spoke of their time serving with Edith and Neill up north, and they spoke about it as a deeply transformative time in their life. I don't think they use those words, but I think how they talked about it was incarnational ministry modeled so beautifully, which means as people who live every aspect of their lives demonstrating the good news of Jesus Christ. And so it was on that warm day in the patio that we got to talking about their lifelong ministry that began in Chicago and then moved up into Indigenous communities up north of here and finally into the Mennonite Church Canada offices. And when Neill mentioned that they were writing some of their memoirs just as a way of telling stories to their family and maybe a few friends, I right away thought that their life story has to be shared more broadly than this. We talk in our schools and in our seminaries and in our pastoral ministry circles about the importance of incarnational ministry, yet we don't do a good enough job of holding up examples of people who do it and who do it with their whole lives. And so I thought we've got to do something here. I can't remember the whole series of events that followed, but perhaps Neill and Edith can fill us in on that. But all I know is that when Steve Heinrichs got his hands on it and when he pulled Deb Frey's in and they put their imaginations together, the magic began to happen. In our time, when we see so much what I would call tokenism or slacktivism that's around, and times where there is previous missionary work done in the name of the church that is pretty heavily colonial and culture crushing, Neill and Edith took the road less traveled. Through a Christology that is broad and generous, they have lived lives of faithfulness to God and to the communities they served. And I often think of, when I think of their work, I think of the quote actually by Friedrich Nietzsche, who said, the essential thing in heaven and on earth is that there should be a long obedience in the same direction, the result of which makes life worth living. And the pages of this book most certainly tell of a life worth living. So I'm thrilled with how the book turned out. I'm thrilled with how it will and already is inspiring lives within Mennonite Church Canada and beyond. And most of all, I'm thrilled and I thank God that you were willing to put your sacred stories of your lives on paper to share with us. Thank you for your living your lives with an open door. Thank you for your vulnerability and for your generosity and for being such genuine instruments of God's peace in this world. I'm so glad for how your story is told in this book, and I'm hoping we all find this to be a very inspiring evening. And I'm hoping we all feel like this evening we're going to be one of the many hundreds of people who you've shared hospitality with in your home and in your cottage. God bless you, and thank you for being willing to do this project. And I invite you forward to share your stories. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that Neill and I were just about wearing our orange shirts tonight, and then we decided that we'll save them for tomorrow And on this special occasion, we're going to wear special gifts that we were given. And so, first of all, I'm wearing the ribbon vest that Thelma Meade's family gifted to me after Thelma's sudden death in July 2020. And I'm wearing it to recognize our friendship of many years, and because we still heard Thelma's voice and saw her smile as we worked on our book.
And I'm wearing the turtle shirt that Marilyn and Dennis Sinclair of the Hollawater First Nation gifted to me. The turtle, which is on the back of it, carries the teachings of life on its back, and it understands the importance of both the journey and the destination. Dennis and Marilyn said that they saw me as a carrier of truth and challenged me to continue walking in that way. And so I wanted to wear this shirt in honor and recognition of them.
You can turn around.
She wants me to turn around. This book could never have been written without the hands-on experience of several people, and their encouragement along the way kept us going. So if we mention your name, please stand when we call your name.
Well, first of all, Deb Fraze was our editor. So
Don't be proud, Deb. She's hiding. I know she's here. I saw her. Go on.
she helped select the stories in this book from the multitude of possibilities that we sent her way. And she helped us make them stories that would draw readers into our life and our world. And her expertise is very evident on every page. Thank you, Deb, for always being there to answer our questions with a smile and lead us on to the finish line.
Matt Veith, you're here, I know. There he is, he's waving. He was a graphic artist. He was interested in our story and had an eye for details and knew how to make the theme of the book reflect in the way it was formed. Thank you, Matt, for making the book look so inviting and readable. Miigwech.
And we're sorry that Matt's sister Marika isn't able to be here tonight. She got involved in this book when a photo in the book captured Matt's imagination and inspired him to envision the picture that you see on the cover of Walking Together. So we want to thank Marika for taking on the challenge to use her artistic talent to create her very first book cover.
We want to thank Steve Heinrichs, who is a former Mennonite Church Canada person, and liaison on our team. Unfortunately, he's not able to attend this evening, but thank you, Steve, for your close attention to details and your suggestions along the way to make the book an important contribution for the larger church. Thanks, Steve.
And we're sorry that Loretta Meade Ross isn't able to be here either tonight, and so that we can thank her in public. But we want to thank Loretta for her attention to detail while reading the first draft and for writing such a heartfelt afterword. It touched us deeply. And lastly, we want to thank Johan Funk, who is hopefully watching tonight at his home in Surrey, BC. He took on the challenge of reading the book draft and writing the foreword right in the middle of several other writing assignments in spring, and we are very grateful.
We often had to pinch ourselves and share our disbelief that this young couple, we like to think we're still young, got married 57 years ago in faraway Bern, Indiana, and that we would even be standing here tonight and would have written a book that shows the amazing learning journey that we were on. Starting a month after our wedding, when we moved to the south side of Chicago on a Mennonite voluntary service assignment in a black ghetto, where the old Mennonite seminary used to be. That move changed our lives in a very good way. And it led us to this campus here in 1967, not this building, but I was a student and Edith worked for the Conference of Mennonites in Canada in the head office on campus. Menno Weeb was the director of what was then called Mennonite Pioneer Mission. And he took a big chance when he invited this young couple to begin our journey in indigenous communities along Lake Winnipeg. His strong impact in our lives is why we named the book and dedicated the book after Meade.
Before we go any further, we'd like to take a moment to introduce our family members who are here with us tonight, because they have walked this journey with us. So I'm asking you to stand when I call your name. Did Kevin and Nancy make it? There they are. Our son Kevin, and our daughter Karen and Richard Dick, daughter Carly, and is Abigail here? There she is, hiding behind her mom. Daughter Kathy and Greg Weave, and their sons Tyler and Alex. And our grandson Caleb Utzi and his partner Emily Penner in the back. And my sister Arlene Nicodemus is here from Bern, Indiana.
Our daughter Jenny and her husband Warren Yutzi are watching online in their home in Park Hill, Ontario. My mother Marjorie is 98 years of age, and we trust that she is able to connect and also watch this. Thank you, Mom. Our parents and family members in Indiana have supported us with prayer and encouragement all these years, and we are glad that some of them are able to watch tonight. Thank you, Arlen, for making it possible. Many of you online and in the audience have walked together with us on our journey, and we are grateful to each and every one of you.
So many times over the years we have commented, if only people in the larger church could be here to see what is happening and understand what we are learning, and could build relationships like we have been privileged to make. People in our larger church and society would understand each other better if that happened. And I think we can all agree that it is very obvious that our society needs much healing and peacemaking and reconciliation between cultures these days. And we know that as a couple, we want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So this book is full of just a few of the many stories that made an impact on our lives. And we want what we experienced and learned to help others on their journey of peacemaking and reconciliation. Because we know that there can be no reconciliation without truth. So we tried to be honest as we shared our stories. And the questions in the study guide in the back of the book are meant to help readers also reflect honestly on their journey and how to move forward in a good way.
Elders have told us over the years that stories are not our own. The stories belong to the community, to you, and to everyone else around them. And stories are told for people to learn, children and adults alike. And before we left our ministry along Lake Winnipeg in 2005 to begin a national position in Mennonite Church Canada, several elders made a point of telling us that now our ministry is to work with our own people and tell them the stories so that they can grow in their journey as well. And so we trusted that we have honored their wisdom.
The grandmothers also reminded us that our growing family is precious and that we have a big responsibility to be an important part of our grandchildren's lives and be role models for them. So these were both important reminders, and we have been trying to take both of those roles seriously.
We're very grateful for the Indigenous elders that you will be meeting shortly. And they gave us permission and encouraged us in the 7 Ojibwe Way of Life teachings as a framework for sharing our stories in this book. Love, respect, courage, honesty, wisdom, humility, and truth. And we were honored by their trust in us and grateful that they read the first draft of the book, gave us their feedback, and shared their recommendations. Their input was of immense help and gave us the encouragement to continue on. When we were first asked, your book should be based on a theme, I couldn't sleep at night. One night it hit me. Why, of course, it's the 7 teachings. It almost parallel to the Galatians. Plus, we have tried to live our lives through the 7 teachings, because all of this is connected one to another. Love and respect and all of that. And so we wanted to somehow find stories that would fit each chapter, and that's not easy because they're so interconnected. But with Deb's help, we were able to do that. Each chapter begins with a short reflection and then several stories. Edith will now read a short passage from the introductory reflection in the courage chapter.
And the definition of courage is find your inner strength to face the difficulties of life and the courage to be yourself. Defend what you believe in and what is right for your community, your family, and yourself. Make positive choices and have conviction in your decisions. Face your fears to allow yourself to live your life. And then it talks a little bit, a fair amount about the disastrous impact of residential schools. But I'm going to go to the next part right after that. But it wasn't just the government who subverted the communities. Some church groups required people to give up their indigenous culture to become Christian. A clear colonialist misunderstanding of both Christianity and traditional indigenous ways of being. One summer, we were introduced to a young Cree man working on an area farm. It didn't take many visits before Edgar admitted to Neill that he felt as though he were living in 2 worlds. Neill, he said, my pastor and the staff at the Bible school keep telling me that my Cree culture and my Christian faith cannot go together. I must choose which direction my life is going to go. But I cannot be a white man. That is not who God created me to be. God gave me brown skin. Didn't God create us all equal, no matter what color our skin is? He made me an indigenous person, and God does not make mistakes. I know that the Cree culture has many good teachings. Why do I have to give up my culture, my heritage, and who I am as a person to be a Christian? He asked earnestly. Neill was glad that Edgar felt safe enough to share his confusion with him, but sad that Edgar had to experience it. Under that kind of pressure, many indigenous people would just have given up and walked away from the Christian church. But Edgar didn't want to walk away from his faith in Jesus. It gave him purpose in life and a strong resolve to walk forward in a good way. Several years later, we were introduced to a growing number of indigenous Christians through a group called Nates, who said they were on the Jesus way, rather than using the word Christian or naming a denomination. Those terms carried many negative connotations for them because of residential schools and the colonialist thinking that too many Christians inflicted on them. Their struggle is real. The Bible and Christianity were not good news to them until they became free to be who Creator God formed them to be. We had to think of Edgar and knew that he would feel comfortable on that path. In many communities, the cultural identity and practices that would have provided a sense of roots or belonging were lost or moved underground to protect future generations against the abuses which continued.
I'd like to read a short story from Soar on Wings Like Eagles, and it's from the Truth chapter, and that's what the shirt that I'm wearing. The turtle represents truth as well. And I'd like to read a short story about this. It was a beautiful spring day in 1973. I went canoeing myself up the Manigatawgan River, about 4 or 5 kilometers on the east side of Lake Winnipeg. All was quiet except for the splash of oars plying the water and birds singing in the trees. It's a perfect time to ponder things. After a football accident and knee surgery the previous fall, my leg had almost healed. And I asked God once again why the accident happened. What was next for me? As I looked up at the clear blue sky, an eagle was circling overhead, and I instantly felt at peace. And the familiar scripture passage of Isaiah 40:31 came to my mind. But those who trust in the Lord for help will find their strength renewed. They will rise up on wings like eagles. They will run and not get weary. They will walk and not grow weak. That day, that eagle was a powerful symbol to me of Creator God's reassuring guidance and presence. It seemed the eagle was sent to reassure me that Edith and I were on the right journey. We were called to continue to learn and serve. Later, I happened to see with Tom, a community elder. So I shared with Tom. Tom smiled. Eagles are so significant to Indigenous people, you know. I nodded. I sensed that. I'd like to learn more. Tom held his hands up to the sky. The eagle flies high, and from that height he can see large areas. He drew a thumb and forefinger together. From that height, the eagle can also see the smallest mouse on the ground and pounce on it. That's why eagles are a symbol of great strength and leadership to us. In fact, Neill, when an eagle appears, we people are put on notice to be courageous and stretch our limits. We are challenged to look at things from a new, higher perspective, even beyond what may seem possible at the time, and aim for the higher objective in the future. And I thought, that's a powerful image, I said. It is, Tom sighed, but there's more. An eagle's wing symbolizes the balance and interdependence between females and males. Men and women must work together to achieve harmony. Tom, I like that. That's a good image of Edith and I working together all these years. The eagle reminds us of our connection to Creator, Tom continued. We see it as a messenger to and from Creator because it soars so high. And that's why we draw strength and peace from its presence. It's why we gift eagle feathers to the true leaders among us. So you see the eagle as a messenger, eh? That's what I thought about the eagle flying over my canoe. I felt such peace when I saw it, I said. Yes, Tom said, you are on a journey of understanding us as a people and our way of life. It's important for us this evening. This evening focus is not so much what we have learned and some of the issues that we have addressed in this book. It's more the issues that we've addressed in this book, I'm sorry. But we are grateful to our friends who have agreed to be with us here tonight and to be on this panel up here with Arlen.
Stan and Norman have had a very special place in our lives over the years and been our teachers as well as our friends. Cree Elder Stan McKay is a United Church minister, an educator, and the past moderator of the National Church. And we first met Stan and his wife Dorothy when we moved to Riverton in 1976 and attended a monthly ministerial of Interlake pastoral families. Stan was also part of the Interchurch Seminar for Workers with Native People that we also attended. And it was for pastoral staff from at least 7 different denominations in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Northwestern Ontario. Stan and Dorothy are once more living on the Fisher River First Nation, his home community.
We could say much more. Métis Elder Norman Meade is the elder in residence at Bald Eagle Lodge on the campus at the University of Manitoba. And he has been ordained as a deacon of the Anglican Church. And before that, he served as the Aboriginal Neighbors Program Coordinator for Mennonite Central Committee, Manitoba. Norman, his wife Thelma, and children Loretta and Raymond lived across the street from us when we lived in Manigatawgan for 6 years. And our families did a lot together and still connect with each other. Even though he lives in Winnipeg, Norman spends as much time as he can in Manigatawgan and continues to pastor the Manigatawgan Community Chapel on the east side of Lake Winnipeg. We also could say much more, Norman.
And we're sorry that Clarence Nepinak's health issues have caused he and Barb to cancel coming tonight. They are Ojibwe knowledge keepers and in demand as traditional teachers in many schools and with many organizations here in the city and beyond. And we first got to know them in the early 1970s when they visited Manigatagan. And some of you will also know that Clarence also worked at Native Ministries YOU, the Youth Opportunities Unlimited, which was a drop-in on Langside Street before going on to university. So our paths crossed often with them as a couple.
We also miss not having Loretta Meade Ross, the present Treaty Commissioner of Manitoba, on the panel tonight. But she's a busy lady with many commitments as Treaty Commissioner across this province and even traveling abroad. This time I would like to call Arlen up and our guests as well. Miigwech.
I feel privileged to share this stage with both of you. Thank you very much for coming. When I was reading Walking Together, it felt like it was written specifically for me, a white settler. I think that is its primary gift, that it is accessible stories, windows into intercultural learnings, challenges that confront my own biases or racism, and invitations to engage reconciliation. It even has a study guide, as was mentioned, that's really focused for white church people like myself. Stan, I'll start with you. You are quoted in the book as saying that the, quote, main task of ministry staff is to minister to their own people. You also suggested that Mennonites have not always heard ministry staff when they come back. I wonder if you could respond further to that. And maybe my question is, what does this book have to say to a white settler?
Well, I would begin by, excuse me, by saying I've been sitting in the room with all of you for a few minutes. And when Neill and Edith walked forward, it was my impulsive response to acknowledge them. Please. What was quoted as my contribution to this conversation in the book is I'm guilty as charged. I expect that when we first met Edith and Neill, they would not have been able to present this kind of reflection. They were coming into the Indigenous communities along Lake Winnipeg, and they were learning. And when Neill mentioned the gathering of the ministerial group, I recall quite clearly that we would meet once a month for an evening meal and some debriefing, some conversation about what each of us were doing. And I remember the pain in a couple of the families of the people working for the Mennonite Church. Some of them had been in the community where they were asked to go to work in the local church. And I would say that they were there and they were learning very quickly about Indigenous peoples. I would suggest that most of them had no orientation of any depth as they went into the community. But as their families became involved and they offered leadership in the spiritual community, they were impacted by the indigenous peoples. They were impacted. They were learning things about our identity and our spirituality. And they were learning what Doc Schrader used to tell me here in the hall. He was the first time I came onto the campus at CMBC, he was a professor here. And I remember sitting with him in his office and he said to me, I think our community is having difficulty acknowledging that the Creator was here before the missionaries. So, going back to the ministerial ecumenical gatherings, I met a couple of families from Mennonite community who were working along Lake Winnipeg. And both these families were dreading going back to their home community because they didn't know how to tell them what it meant for them to learn about us. They didn't have the words or the concepts, and I think they felt tremendous pressure to say that everyone in our villages was becoming like them. And that wasn't happening. And so they felt some element of failure and a lot of pressure about how they would go home and tell their families what they'd been about for the last 2, 3, 4 years. So that's why I said what I said. And it's a hard truth.
Thanks for elaborating, and it is what we need to hear. I don't know, Norman, if you want to say anything specific to that. My next question is for you, but if you have a comment.
Yeah, I have a. Is the mic on? You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I want to make a comment. First of all, thank you, Neill and Edith, for the tobacco. You notice I accepted it in my left hand, the hand on the arm closest to the heart. And when I speak to you tonight, I speak from the heart of what our relationship has been, over the years with Neill and Edith, and with the book now, that we read. And the question being, how can we improve the ministry services to our Indigenous communities? And if I heard the question directly, or correctly, pardon me, that it would be that we must have our people serving our people as best we can, as much as we can. And when I go home and serve my people after learning from Neill and Edith, as we live neighbors in Manicotagan, a lot of what I learned, I'm using that and practicing that today when I do my services back home, whether it's in the Anglican Church or in the little Mennonite Church or in the Catholic Church. And I just want to correct the introduction. You said as an Anglican deacon. I'm an Anglican minister now. And so when I do the services that I do, I have to give credit where it's due, and that a lot of it belongs to you two, of what you had taught me over the years, of how we can serve our people, And whenever I go home and serve our people as a Métis minister or an Indigenous minister, a clergy, I get blessed like 100-fold each time I'm up there. I did 2 funerals last weekend, one on Saturday and one Sunday, one in Manicotagan and one in Black River. And each time I go and do whatever service I'm doing, these funerals, with a full hall, we have to use the hall in most cases because the churches are not big enough for the number of people. And in Black River, it was a good example on Sunday when I did the service for a man about a little bit younger than me. And I know we look here in these front rows here, there's no one sitting in these front rows, but there, those chairs were full. The front row chairs were full from where I was doing the service. And it's one of the things that when we work with our people, we encourage them, to come and be part of the service that we are doing here. I'm only facilitating. When I heard Neill mention that a number of times. As the minister, sometimes they think, well, he is the leader up there. Yeah, I'm seen to be the leader up there as the clergy. But you know what? I'm only facilitating here. I'm only helping as a helper here today, you know, when I do those services. And that I picked up from some of the work that Neill and Edith had shown me over the years of our relationship. And so I think it's important that when we read the book and we understand and reflect on how we can put some of the teachings, the 7 sacred teachings, for example, into real practice, into real good use. We know that what you have learned, Neill, and what we have learned from you, both you and Edith, I know that knowledge works this way. You know, wisdom comes from above. You know, this is what I teach as an elder and as a pastor. Wisdom comes from the Creator, from God. Knowledge is passed on one to another this way. So I want to thank you, say miigwech to you for allowing me to learn from what you taught me. And I know you already mentioned that you had also learned from Thelma and I. And thank you for wearing that vest. Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Norman. About learning, and learning as a two-way conversation and a two-way integral life, as being essential to cross-cultural relationships. I think walking together, as we've been saying, is an honest portrayal of Neill and Edith's own learning journey and growth. And a critical question in the book, Loretta picks up in the afterword, and Norman, you posed to Neill many years ago, after I don't know how long you had been in the community, but early on, and you asked the question quite forthrightly, if I understood the story right. When you moved here, Neill, did you think you were better than the rest of us in Manicotagan? Can you unpack that question many years later?
Yes, I remember in their house, Bible study, and you know, after we were talking a bit about, you know, them as newcomers to our community, you know, what it would be like. And of course, we had different clergy over the years that came to our community and to help us, you know, along and so on. But Neill and I, it wasn't too long after they moved to Manicotagan that Neill and I became, well, like brothers, I would say, you know. We were close. I mean, our children were their children's age, and we lived neighbors just across the road, and the church was kind of, you know, there as well. And so we had many meetings and visits together. And so, in asking that question, you know, and I know that in Loretta's words, you know, she said it's the words that sometimes many of us would like to ask, but we sometimes haven't got the courage or the, you know, to ask it. And so knowing Neill and Edith as our family and our like a brother, you know, I knew it was okay to ask him that question. But I also thought of the scriptures, what the scriptures say about brotherly love. You know, love your brother. You know, and when you look at the scriptures, and I forget the scriptures, maybe Reverend McKay can help me here, but I think probably in maybe 1 John or one of those scriptures that it talks about that brotherly love, and it talks about God's love and how that is passed on to us. And in that scripture, we will find that brotherly love, you can ask the questions that you would like to ask of how you're feeling coming to us. I think it might be referred to in the scriptures as testing the spirit of those that are coming to stay with us for as many years as they stayed. And when we test the spirits of one another or of each other, sometimes we have to ask those difficult questions. And I know that an honest question from the heart gets an honest answer. That's what I expected, and I think Neill answered it from the heart. And so when I speak of this tobacco that I accepted from you just now in my left hand, what I say tonight from the heart, and what your thoughts were at that evening was from the heart as well, and how it brought us closer together as brothers, as families, knowing that I could ask that difficult question, and where in Scripture that you would refer to that brotherly love that we had developed over the years that we spent together. And not only in the church, a lot of times it was on the land, a lot of times it was on the river, a lot of times it were in meetings where we'd be sitting with other people that we would have to ask these difficult questions, but always in the spirit, within a good way, a good spirit. You know, testing the spirit is really important when you can ask those kinds of questions. So that kind of sums up a bit of why I felt comfortable in asking that question, and I accepted your answer as being an honest answer as well, Neill. And I want to thank you for that. Yeah. Miigwech.
Stan, do you have a comment about the role of listening in one's intercultural growth?
Yes, I do want to say that the book, Walking Together, is walking together with eyes and ears open. It's a way of being open to possibilities. And I know that the communities that Edith and Neill lived in with their families were often times of challenge. Things weren't always smooth, but always the response was respectful. And the stories in the book indicate how respectful they were individually and as a family with their neighbors and with their community. And the thing about building relationships is they don't happen very quickly when there's a long history of not being heard. I speak as an Indigenous person. I speak from the tobacco as well, that it takes time to bring healing. And I know there's conversation about tomorrow. And reconciliation doesn't happen like that. But by looking at the stories, looking at the book, and hearing each other, I think we deal with the truth. The many truths, the different levels of truth that come to us in our living together. And eventually we could say things to each other, that, as Norman has indicated, that are about honesty, out of the pain and out of the difference. We find some common ground. In our language we say, "Mino pimatisuin," not just life, pimatisuin, but good life, fullness of life. And those stories in Walking Together are indications of the journey to fullness of life. And the fact that it's framed with the 7 sacred teachings, the 7 guides to life in community, I believe is the beginning of recognizing that everyone is gifted. So the history of our missions in our various denominations have often been that the truth is being brought to an empty vessel. And the stories are about encounters of coming together to learn the truth together from various perspectives. So I'm so grateful that this material is available to us to ponder our truth and the truth that is around us in creation and in our neighbors. Egusi.
I've got to ask if there's a story that didn't make the book or might be highlighted in the book that you would like to make public tonight.
Go ahead, Norm.
Well, I can think of quite a few stories. Some are kind of funny, and some are more serious. I'll start with the kind of the funny ones that, Neill and Edith and Thelma and I, we spent a lot of time together. Not only at home in Manigatawgan, but elsewhere. And I remember going to 2 world conferences, Mennonite world conferences I'm talking about. And I remember the one, and I forget what year it was, I think it might have been 2009 or 6, I forget now, down in Paraguay. And going to that conference with our children. I mean, Sarah, our oldest granddaughter, came with us that time. And, it was quite a trip, to say the least, to go down and see a country that we would have never got to see otherwise. And one of the things that was kind of funny when we arrived there and stayed in the community where we stayed, like we spent a lot of time together, and we ended up staying in the same little building. And I remember Neill and Edith, they're so good and they were generous about where are we going to sleep. There was 2 little rooms, right? And there was only 1 bed. And Neill and Edith, out of their love for us, said, "Well, you guys, a little bit older than us, you guys take the bed." Thelma and I, we didn't want to say no, we don't. We won't take the bed. Sure, well, thank you so much. We are a little bit older than you, so thank you, Neill.
That's an honest answer.
Yeah, an honest answer. And so, well, where are you going to sleep, you guys? Well, we'll sleep in the other room. Well, there's no bed in the other room. Yeah, but there's a table there. A table? You're going to sleep on the table? Yeah, we'll sleep on the table. I wasn't sure that table would hold Neill. So Thelma said, listen, if we hear a crash, we'll have to go out there and see what's happening. No crash. I get a little while. Oh, Neill is snoring. They're okay. So, we'll never forget that. I mean, how they just managed with what we had, right? And it was a story that I won't forget. The other conference that we attended was, and this is not so much to do with you folks, but it has to do with Meade when we were in Strasbourg at the other world conference that we attended. And, I was in the back seat with Thelma and others that were with us, and Menno was driving. And so we were looking at the mountains and admiring the beauty of that country. And Menno, of course, he nosy as he was, he had the window rolled down and looking out the window there and observing the hills and the mountains and the animals out there. And all of a sudden, ouch, he says. And Lydia said, what happened? Oh, a bee stung my Mennonite nose, he says. A bee got in the open window and stung him on the nose. Well, you shouldn't be driving. You should let Norman drive. And after we stopped, you better drive, he says. She said, you're too nosy. You're looking all around and you're not watching where you're going. So I ended up driving for quite a bit of the time. I mean, that's a story with Menno and Lydia, that relationship. But the one thing that I haven't even mentioned it to you folks, I don't think you might know this, but that after Neill and Edith left Manigatawgan, and while they were there, Neill became our first mayor that's in the book, I believe, at Manigatawgan. I was a little bit hurt by him becoming the first mayor. I wanted to be the first Métis mayor in Manigatawgan, and it didn't turn out that way. Neill became our first mayor, and I became mayor later on. But out of his becoming our mayor and our pastor at the same time, it set the table for me to get a job with the provincial government after knowing and learning from you folks a lot of what I picked up in my early years of educating, getting, as a young man and with a family. And I spent 26 years in the provincial government system, partly because you, as our first mayor, and Edith, as our secretary, had introduced me to the right people at the right time, which led to that job of 26 years of being able to maintain a home and a family that I did out of that employment that I had. Plus, after that, of the work I do now at the University of Manitoba, after 7 years of being there, a lot of what I learned on that job, and all kind of the roots go right back to our relationship, that I'm still benefiting from that, what I'd learned from you and that relationship that we had with you. So I want to say again, miigwech for, to you for this long-lasting, income and livelihood and a good life that I had with Thelma and our family. So I want to thank you for that.
Stan.
Just very briefly, I guess I've been missing the background of the move from Bern to Chicago. I'm trying to imagine the trauma of moving from a rural community where peace was and respect was normal life to the racism and the violence in Chicago. So I would have personally liked a little more background about the kind of trauma that created at that time in your lives. I know it is transforming. And so in your second book, I think we have more to learn from your wisdom and experience. And one of the things would be, as Indigenous, we need to understand the impact of trauma and how we can make that a positive part of our growth. So I will be looking to you for more wisdom. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you. Yeah. We're going to open this up to comment and question to the rest of you. And those online can send a comment or question by chat. I'll try to monitor that. But for the next just a few minutes, if there's something you would like to ask of Norman or Stan, or Neill and Edith. There are mics here if you'd like.
While we're waiting on a question, if there are any, I want to mention one more thing. One of the 7 sacred teachings, maybe the main one, is love. And when we have and know about God's love, as told to us here in the book, God's love and the love for each other is so very, very important for any relationship. The love of Creator, the love of God, is so very important in our daily lives. In whatever we do, and Neill and Edith found this out in real life with their family, as they went about doing their services, that there's nothing stronger than that love that glues us together as people. Love one another, love your neighbor, And this is so very important for us to know and understand that if we're going to move anywhere forward in way of church and church building and reintroducing church in a different way, we just can't do it without that teaching of love. Of course, the other 6 teachings that goes with that follows that one teaching of love. But there's nothing stronger than what you mentioned in the book about how you can do so much with love and how you can do so little without it.
You'll be curious to know that there are 34 screens online. Thank you for joining us. And from Indiana, but also from BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and may have missed some. So it's great to have had this gathering together with many others. Any comment? Go ahead, Vic.
I'm Victor Cleaver from Winnipeg. My connection with the subject matter goes back to the 1960s, I guess, when Meneweeb had organized a weekend for our church's youth group up at Bloodvein River. And that was the first encounter that we had with a bunch of young people from Winnipeg and a bunch of young people from Bloodvein. A very good weekend. But one of the questions that has been on my mind for many years ever since is the intersection of Christian faith, which we have taken as being very important in our identity as Mennonite people, and bringing that together with Native spirituality, and how those two can best be reconciled. And I understand both of you have been working exactly in that area. You mentioned NATES earlier. I don't know if everybody knows about NATES, but it's another significant program, seems to me, of trying to bring together this different cultural background. But I'd be interested if you'd have to say more. I haven't read your book yet, Neill and Edith, so I'm looking forward to your insights as well. But you might want to talk about that a bit.
Here you go.
I think there is a great challenge for Indigenous globally to hold together what we understand as truth and relationship to God, Creator. There's difficulty because much of our history has been captured in denial of our having any truth. We've been marginalized in the conversation about understanding the intentions of the Creator. So the challenges are difficult because it has divided our communities. We were talking over dinner about the many denominations, many different Christian communities that have come to us over generations to tell us what is truth. I'm reminded of the Cree leader in Alberta, Maskipitun. His Cree name was Maskipitun. He had a broken arm, and that word relates to the broken arm. And he experienced in the Edmonton area the arrival of Catholic missionaries, Anglican missionaries, Methodist missionaries, each of them coming and saying, we have the truth. This is the truth, and this is how you must live to follow the truth that we bring. He listened to all of them and decided he'd have to wait before he made a decision about his own life. So I think that is still the question in many, many people's minds. The other reality is that within our own communities, we were talking about the fact that we lived in Norway House for a time, worked in the church there, and in Norway House, there are long history of missions, and there's an established Roman Catholic presence, Anglican presence, United Church presence. And the families are divided. And because the teaching was infant baptism, little tiny children were made members of churches very early in their lives, often in the first hours of their life. So the difficulty of the community in Norway House holding up what might be Indigenous spiritual understanding becomes very, very difficult. And I think that it'll be a while, probably a few generations, because now in Norway House there are chapels in addition to the 3 denominations that are established there. There are now ceremonial lodges of traditional spiritual teachers in the community. And so the division hasn't ended. It's still very much a part of the life. And somewhere in all of that, there is a need for the 7 teachings that we're talking about tonight. So I think if we arrive at a place where the conversation is open, then many truths will be shared between peoples. But I would just mention, in the midst of climate crisis, let me just mention that Indigenous spirituality has an understanding of God, Creator, Spirit, that holds in a sacred way creation. And now that we have climate crisis, what the world is trying to do, in my mind, at least as I understand it, with the Paris Accord and so on, is to manage our way out of this crisis, which is a spiritual crisis. It's about the spirit of the earth and our spirits as persons. So I think it's not management we're after. It's conversation and stories about how we share life in a good way on the earth. So who owns the truth? The great mystery. And our stories will enrich us, as Edith and Neill have demonstrated, to be at a place of conversation. And I think if we come with humility and respect, with love, we will find a way to be together. So I don't have an answer, but I think I'm on a journey, which is about discovering my own identity, my own experience of residential school. And tomorrow, Dorothy and I will walk with survivors in our village, and we'll wonder about Indigenous truth and what it is that we can have for Minopimate for the good life.
I will add a little bit to Reverend McKay's way of describing that and the way the question is framed. We have to, and I know that some of us do understand, and it becomes a little bit easier when you get as old as I am now and have gone through and seen what I have seen in my late 70 life. Spirituality and the Spirit of God, the Spirit of Creator, is much greater than any of us here in this room could ever comprehend. We just can't understand the power of the stories behind the spiritual stories that go with the lives that we live today. So what do? We turn to the natural way, the natural laws of the land and of the water. And when we see what is happening, particularly right now on our east coast of Canada, but also down south and on the U.S. side, when that storms come off of those oceans where the earth made up of 70% water, and we think that, do you think God is telling us that there's something going on here with the world of which we live, of we help to create? I would say chances are pretty good that the Creator is a little bit upset with what we have done or what we're not doing in relating to the natural world, where the spirit is and rests. Right. I think that the Creator is saying, I'm waking you folks up with what I'm showing you, and if you don't get it now, I'm not sure how you're going to get it. When I'm asked on Tuesday, I'll be speaking about our relationship with our spiritual relationship with the land and with the water and with the forest and so on. But I'll also have to be telling our people at the university about my upbringing as a Catholic boy growing up with the Catholic Church back home. That forms part of my religion, my religious beliefs, and I can't forget about that. Because my mother taught me the first prayer. She didn't teach me the 7 sacred teachings because she didn't know of them herself. She taught me the 10 Commandments. And I use the 10 Commandments and I use the 7 sacred teachings together many times in my preaching and my teachings. And so when we think about, so how do we explain or how do we teach from both positions? The first thing I would say is that, we have to understand that the Creator, God, is such an awesome God that I'm not going to be the one to be up front here and saying to you, I understand everything that God wants me to know. No, I can't do that. But what I can say to you is that when I go home, and every time I go home and come away from there feeling blessed, I can tell you that it's my people that are blessing me. I'm being blessed by the people that I'm serving. And that's how it was meant to be. And that's how it should be. And that's how it's supposed to be. when you feel blessed as the servant of your people. I want to share that with you because every single time I go home and do whatever I'm doing, whether it's a Sunday morning service or a funeral or a wedding or whatever it might be, when I go home and serve my people, I walk out of there feeling like, how did I get blessed 100 times over? Did I bless anyone in what I did? You know, and so this is just the kind of thing that we have to, and I will keep doing it until so long as I am able to. I will keep doing that kind of work because it's what I feel good about. Because I am being blessed by my people in what I do. So that's my answer.
I'm going to end the Q&A with the one question that came to us by chat here from Moses Falco. He's a pastor here in Winnipeg. And he asks, within the Mennonite circle, which has seen programs and staffing change and evolve and cut and so on, what would the voice of the Indigenous community say to us as far as the programs that ought to be envisioned at this point, or the relationships that ought to be considered? These are my words now, but he's asking, what advice do you have for the younger generation who do not have the same structures in place anymore like we once had? Does the old model work? Where are we in the point of evolution as to what is the best advice for the Mennonite community today?
Well, I will try to respond to that in this way. When I asked my brother that question, and my brother Billy, is still traps. He still hunts. He's out hunting probably tonight. But when he's out in the bush on the trap line, and when he said to me, I said, "What are we going to do with our young people to get them back, sort of on spiritual track, if you will?" And he said, "Send them to God's big church." I said, "God's big church? What are you talking about?" And he said, "My trap line. If they come with me a few times to my trap line, or on my hunting trips that I go on," he said, "they will learn a spirituality that will touch their hearts, touch their lives in a way that they'll never forget." He said, "Get them to come and spend a few nights out in the bush with me, and they will learn about a spirituality that they might never have known about otherwise." He said, "That's what it's going to take, a return to the land. Go back to some of the traditional ways of life. Go out on the lake, spend some time with the fishermen that are out there." He said, "That is what I would say to the question of how do we get our people, our young people, back on track." And he said, not only that, but when they're out there learning from the natural world of spirituality that is out there, he said, and it's just waiting for us. The garden is there. It's just waiting for us to come into the garden, to come and benefit from what God had placed there, 6 days before he put us, humankind, in that garden. That garden is just waiting for those young people out there, whether they're non-Indigenous or Indigenous young people. He said that to me is at least part of the answer that I would say of how we help to get young people sort of back on track. He said, if we keep trying to get them into the church building, the church on the corner, it's not going to happen. He said, we're going to spend all our energy trying to do that, and it's not working, and we should know and understand that because it isn't working, we have to find a different way, and that different way is going back to the land.
Again, a very challenging question. I'm not sure how technology works, but the people at home, thank you for being there, wherever that is. I think the question in some ways reminds me that as Indigenous peoples, and not only here on Turtle Island, but around the world, often we're marginalized on the land. We lose our capacity for self-sufficiency. And I remember a few years ago someone trying to explain to me the Canadian safety net. welfare and social assistance of various kinds. Those are demeaning approaches. But people like Menno Wiebe started a gardening project. And he found young people to go and be engaged in Indigenous communities. That built friendships, transformed lives, created food. I know he is involved in wild rice processing, blueberry developments in Northwest Ontario. I think those kinds of efforts to find ways to be self-sufficient and creative on the land, as Norman has said, there are still things that are possible. And I think that those ways bring dignity to those who share knowledge about growing coffee in the Philippines. We heard that over our evening meal, undertaken by people from the Mennonite community who have skills. So I think the sharing of skills with respect, the sharing of information, the support, the listening, all of that engages us in community. And I'm just grateful that that option is still there. There are very few Indigenous communities that will not welcome you to the community. I know our community would welcome you to share in a cup of tea and some conversation. And those are the stories that Edith and Neill have brought to us. Those stories that are transformative about human meeting human and the conversation being about the future and possibilities for hopeful life. Thanks be to God.
Thank you. I want to express my thanks to both Norman and Stan, Neill and Edith. Doug will come up and also give thanks, as well as Neill and Edith. But let's just begin with our panel.
Thank you, Frank.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I want to thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the gift. Really appreciate that. And thank you, Stan, Reverend Stan. Good to be sitting with you.
Tonight has been a very humbling experience and very special to us. And we'd like to thank Stan and Norman for sharing with us their stories, their thoughts. Mean so much to us. Kichi miigwech. And thanks, Dorothy, for joining him, coming as well. Your insight throughout our relationships over the years has helped mold us on our journey, and that's been very special. I know you've both mentioned that, but you have impacted us greatly, and we thank you so much to both of you, more than you will ever know, how you impacted our lives.
And we also want to thank Arlen for leading the evening and for Doug's sharing. And thank you to each one of us, each one of you who has honored us by being here, and also whether it's in person or online. Because our prayer is that this book, Walking Together, will be an encouragement to all of those who read it to build relationships across cultures and walk their own journey of reconciliation. So, kichi miigwech.
Kichi miigwech.
Thank you all for your engagement tonight. It's been a good conversation. And as I said, this conversation has been recorded and will be available to view at commonword.ca, where you can also, of course, borrow or buy the book. I'll turn on the lights and you're welcome to come join me in Common Word. I have included a link to the book on the chat for those online. Walking Together is a story formed, as we've heard, by pivotal events and relationships Neill and Edith encountered while serving and learning. May we all find renewed determination to continue building richer relationships with neighbors across cultural lines, all with a posture, an open posture of listening and learning. I wish you all safety and good health and a good night. Thank you for coming.